Thank you for staying with us. Now, the recent military coup in Niger Republic has raised many questions about its impact on the country and the region. In this report, I beg your pardon, compiled by News Central's correspondent Bettina Nweli, are updates about the events which will form our potential talking points for this discussion. Do take a look.
The first of 3 planes carrying mostly French and other European citizens evacuated from Niger landed in Paris early Wednesday, a week since a coup toppled one of the last pro-Western leaders in the Sahel region. The coup has sent shockwaves across West Africa's Sahel region as the regional bloc Ecowas has threatened to use force to reinstate Bazoum.
We will not allow coup after coup in West Africa's sub-region.
While military-ruled Mali and Burkina Faso say they would come to Niger's defense. With the risk of escalating conflict, other countries are now organizing repatriation flights.
Et un peu malheureux de laisser le Niger dans cette situation de prise d'otage plus que de putsch. Voilà. Et on est content d'être revenu.
C'est important justement de revenir.
On n'est pas sûr que ça aura pu dégénérer, mais c'est toujours bien d'être rentré. On verra dans les jours et semaines prochaines comment ça va évoluer là-bas. Et nous qui sommes assez attachés, on va suivre ça avec attention.
The recent coups in the region have come amid a wave of vitriol aimed at former colonial power France that resulted in its troops being kicked out of Mali and Burkina Faso in recent times. Many of those soldiers are now stationed in Niger. However, Niger's new military leaders have arrested senior politicians and warned against any foreign attempts to extract Bazoum, who is still shut in his palace.
Normal. À Niamey, il n'y a pas de tension particulière en ville, il n'y a pas de stress particulier. La population vaque à ses occupations, donc il n'y a pas de menace particulière.
A declaration by Mali and Burkina Faso on Monday night suggested cracks within Ecowas, and it is not yet clear what help Mali and Burkina Faso would provide, given that their armies are already failing to contain domestic insurgencies that have killed thousands. Niger Republic is the world's 7th biggest producer of uranium, the radioactive metal widely used for nuclear energy and treating cancer.
That you have just watched is a report compiled by News Central's Bettina Nweli concerning Niger Republic, who should have been celebrating their 63rd independence, but well, we can't call that much of a celebration. Now, joining us virtually to discuss this is News Central's Head of Research, Abdulateef Ahmed, who will be joining us virtually to talk more about the situation in Niger. If we have Abdulateef, who will join us. But while we wait for... Okay, Abdulateef, it's good to have you. All right. Okay, while we're waiting to join, to have Abdulateef, I'll just go straight into it. Niger Republic, close friend, close neighbor to Nigeria. In fact, both names sound very similar. Nigeria, exactly. Yeah. You know, and they should have been celebrating, or they actually celebrated their 63rd independence ceremony yesterday. Unfortunately, this was shrouded by the drama of the military coup that just happened. Before going into Niger, I want to say this. Now, between 2020 and 2023, we've seen a host of African countries that have experienced coup. Yeah. Exactly. And many of them in the West African sub-region, most of them Francophone countries. And I want to bring this close to Nigeria. Now, they say when there's a fire in your neighbor's kitchen, you should be very wary because it might just cross over to yours. Do you think at this point Nigeria should be very concerned?
I really think Nigeria should be concerned because these are people who are closest to us, as in everything that happens there practically just affects Nigeria. And Nigeria still, as I just heard before, and I was reading earlier, Nigeria still gives part of Niger power.
Exactly.
We are so entwined, you know, Nigeria was involved in the democracy of these people. We're so close in terms of economic ties. Other things that we talk about and we do together now might actually draw. In fact, some Nigerians with word on the street are saying that if Nigeria involves itself too much in these, Nigeria might be expecting a coup. Nobody's praying for that. Yeah, but that's the truth. People are now worried and scared that this might actually spill into Nigeria because they're so close. And let's check all the neighboring countries: Burkina Faso, Mali, now Niger.
Yeah.
What could be next?
Exactly.
So it's a major concern, sincerely. It's a major concern for Nigeria. And Nigerians by now should be worried. The Nigerian administration should be worried. I know the president happened to be the president of the current chairman of Ecowas, and that might help take a better stand against whatever sanctions they want to give, mete out against this particular junta. But we've seen over the years that these sanctions really does not.
In fact,
until the juntas
exactly,
are really ready to do something.
I was going to come. I was going to come to those, ECOWAS sanctions. But before we do, let's check if Abdulateef is with us now. Abdulateef, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good evening, Abdulateef. It's good to hear you. Good to have you join us on the show. So, all right. Now, of course, we're talking, the military coup in Niger Republic. Are you still with us?
Yes, he is.
I'm with you.
All right. So the military coup in Niger Republic is what we're discussing at the moment. It sounds like your background may be a bit noisy. We may have to come back to you, Abdulateef, in a short while. So moving away from that, Niyi, let's still talk about this. Now, I was discussing, or rather, we were discussing, the effect of, the West African bloc, talking about ECOWAS on all that is going on. Now, I was watching a news report, and somebody, the guest there, was saying that ECOWAS used to be very strong when the leaders of ECOWAS, or particularly the leaders of Nigeria back then, were military rulers. The time of General Sani Abacha, General Ibrahim Babangida. I remember, coincidentally, my dad, who was a helicopter pilot then, was one of the ECOMOG, which is the military arm of ECOWAS. ECOMOG contingents that went to the likes of Chad, went to Liberia, and went to Sierra Leone during their own civil wars. And in a couple of years, or say a couple of months, we saw the impact that ECOMOG had in those countries. Going forward, now that we have a democratically elected government, or we've had democratically elected governments, it seems that the power of ECOMOG is not as strong as it used to be anymore. Some have even called ECOMOG toothless bulldogs, that just is all backs and no bites.
We can't really say that, because the truth is, these nations we're talking about are sovereign nations. They are nations who, in some actually fought for their independence, some negotiated their way out of independence, some even recently got their independence. I'm talking about African nations now, and we need to give democratic rule a way to actually thrive. A lot has been said about how we got here, how Africa got here, and the violence and the bloodshed that Africa has actually gone through. But if Africa needs to move out, if Africa needs to compete with the Committee of Nations, Europe, in Asia, and all these places we see, we need to start giving the democratic rule a place to thrive. And it's not about, and that's why there must be full condemnation when it has to do with military taking over. It's not only in Niger that things are not working. What are the juntas complaining about? There's corruption, yes. There's insecurity, yes. But it's not only in Niger. True. It's happening in Somalia. It's happening in so many other African countries.
In fact, so, in the Gulf of Guinea, sorry, not Gulf of Guinea, in the Sahel region, basically.
Yes, there's an uproar. So why should that be the way out? That's not the way. Africa is trying to move away from all this bloodshed and all this authoritarian rule. People have a right, and it should be respected. And I wonder when some people say, oh, the Nigerians are actually happy that the junta took over. There are gray areas to that particular conversation, because they are happy that France is not in charge.
In fact, so let me stop you there. There are 2 points I want to bring out of what you have just said. Now, the first one is, the Nigerians being happy that France is not in charge. There is in mathematics, they call it the LCM, lowest common multiple, right? Amongst many of these countries, or most of, if not all of these countries that have experienced coups in the past 3 or 4 years. First of all, they are West African countries, if I'm not mistaken, and then they were former French colonies, right? And now look at what's going on. There is insecurity in all of these countries that has happened, and then there's economic unrest, economic issues in those countries. So let's start with this: French colonies, insecurity, economic challenges. So again, like I said, the LCM here are those particular three things. But how is it that these countries are colonies of France? Does it mean that France has been doing something wrong, or that these countries have decided to break that stronghold? You know, France actually has a very huge stronghold on their former colonies in terms of economy. They use the CFA francs. Language, they speak French. You know, almost everything they do is from France. There's this very stronghold, if I can put it that way. So is it something that France has been doing wrong, or is it that they just have this awakening and say, you know what, we want to be a people of our own?
I think they are getting offers from other powers.
That was the next place I was taking into. Exactly.
The truth is, when you check it, most of the places that France was before, the French were before, is it that the Russians are trying to get in now, the Western powers are trying to get in, China is trying to move in.
Yes,
Let's not forget that France still has hold over, I think it should be Mayotte, one of the Comoro Islands.
Yes.
And recently, we saw what happened where Mayotte and Comoros and Anjouan Island, the Anjouan and the Comoros Island people were trying to get into Mayotte because they feel life is a little bit better there because it's still under the French colony. But let's face facts here. Nigeria has moved, Niger has moved away from, has moved past all the stages. They had, for Christ's sakes, they had their first democratic elected ruler recently. Do you know what it takes to get to that level? Do you know how long they've had to work for this? I just feel that maybe there's a news passing around about what the French is doing wrong, or the impact of what the French have done. And now they are realizing that, wait, we can't continue like this. Things needs to change. But the question now will be, who are they now opening the doors to? Because it's not like those ones have a better plan for them. Now, that's where the issues are.
And that leads me to my next question. Like you just said, things need to change. Now, some have called this the movement from colonialism to new colonialism to another kind of colonialism. Do we call it new colonialism now? Now, they moved away from France, and now, like they say, nature doesn't like vacuum. Where there's space, something must be filled.
Yes.
So now you can see that many of these countries, like you clearly stated, are now being, would I say, diplomatically going in bed with either the Russians or the Chinese. Should we see this as good news for them, or is it looking like from fry pan to fire? I bear in mind, I'll quickly come in here. Now, during the time of colonialism, the colonial powers, talking about France and probably Great Britain, came with force, all right, which was a challenge. But eventually, you know, the countries went up with that, and we are where we are today. Now, these new, I don't want to call them colonial powers just yet, but these new, will I say, investors, so to speak.
They term it neo-colonialism right now.
I'm calling investors because instead of coming with force, now they are coming with economic power, coming with business ideas and infrastructural development. But then again, there will still be ties. And I'm largely talking about China and Russia. Should African countries be wary of these countries, these new, what I call them, Eastern power blocks?
I think, how do I put this? Someone who is bigger than you is really bigger than you. There's really nothing you can do about it. When you're large, you're large. It just has to do with how we relate with these people. I remember the last summit African leaders had with the Europeans. You could see the likes of William Ruto speaking. You could see the likes of even the South African president Ramaphosa speaking and saying things need to change about how Africa is being viewed and African countries are being viewed and respect must be earned. Yes, and one of the ways to earn these is to actually let democracy rule. And I feel that is one of the ways Africa can actually get itself and understand who it is. If Africa does not really understand what kind of continent, for Christ's sake, do you know how many natural resources are in Africa that supply other part of the world? These people know what is in Africa, but the Africans themselves do not know what they have. Or let me say, bad management, let me put it that way, has made Africans not really understand the power that they have. If not, we are supplying most of the nations with what they need and what they would need to survive. We should be the one holding the power. But maybe the negotiator now, which is the administrators, the people in the helm of power, are not really doing their job. Then that is where democracy must work. That is why I said democracy must still thrive. Because democratic process will help the Africans choose the right leader that can negotiate better for them and make Africa stand among the Committee of Nations.
Now, as we quickly wrap this up, I want to ask you something. As someone who is largely pushing for democracy, like you have been saying, the broadcast I said I watched, where a guest was speaking concerning, speaking about ECOMOG and ECOWAS, the West African bloc being weaker than it used to be, also said that sometimes ECOWAS, the strength of ECOWAS and ECOMOG is a function of the leadership of ECOWAS and ECOMOG. Now, she said that back in the day, the leadership of ECOWAS used to be, like I said, military generals, very strong military men.
Yeah, well known,
and all of
renowned
that.
for their strength.
Exactly.
And all, yeah.
But that recently, like we all know, the head of ECOWAS is the current president of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Now, this lady, said that Nigeria is just coming out from a, I think she used the word controversial election that brought in this leader, and as such, that may have affected the leadership of ECOWAS as well. So if you bring the leader from a country where he or she got in through certain shaky means, that may also affect the leadership of this West African power bloc. Do you agree?
I do not agree to that, because the truth is, at the end of the day, these are nations. Even if one of the African country has been taken over by the junta, you can't just dash in there with the military and just
begin to change things.
Just begin to make change.
Just before you go in, let me see. Abdulateef, are you with us now? Hello, Abdulateef, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for joining us. It's good to have you. So, well, we've continued dinner already without you, and we're almost done.
Dessert.
Exactly, we're almost done. We've had the appetizer and the main course. It's just dessert that is left. Now, we're talking, of course, we're talking about Niger, the coup around Niger, and how it affects, the West African sub-region, so to speak. Very quickly, I was speaking to Niyi just now, and talking to him about how I watched the news broadcast where a guest was directly relating the weakness of ECOWAS and ECOMOG, relating it to the weakness of the leader of this particular bloc. Now, we do know that the leader of ECOWAS right now, the chairman of ECOWAS, is the current president of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And this guest was saying that the president of Nigeria got in through an election that is still being contested, meaning that it's still a bit shaky, and that is also a possibility as to why ECOWAS influencing his decision towards ECOWAS and ECOMOG, in general. Do you think there is any direct relationship between, Nigeria's president and the situation surrounding his emergence as president with the way ECOWAS is being run, and how, will I say, supposedly weak ECOWAS is now compared to before?
I sincerely do not see the link between his emergence as a president and his response to the crisis in the Niger Republic. Essentially, once there is a crisis situation, especially a coup d'etat, it's expected that ECOWAS responds as quickly as possible. Regardless of who will have chaired ECOWAS, the response will be almost the same. Now, don't forget that when it happened in Mali, the response of ECOWAS was essentially because of the body language, if I can use that, body language of Assimi Goïta. He was open to negotiations. He was open to transition, into civilian rule, and that is why, after extracting a promise from him, ECOWAS decided to allow him that transitory role, as against the current military leaders in Niger Republic. What we have are contending forces between Western nations, Russia on one hand, and then you have France, the United States on the other hand. Again, this is an African problem. We do not need to wait for external interlopers to decide for us the direction in which a country will be run. However, if you look at the response of the president, you will understand that beyond sanctions, for example, there has been mediations. He had called on Patrice Talon, President Patrice Talon, to speak with the military leaders. has called on the president of Chad, who is also a military leader, even though he is not within the West African region, called on him to speak with the military leaders. As we speak, former President General Abdulsalam Abubakar and the Sultan of Sokoto are heading to Niamey to intervene, speak to the military leaders. Essentially, use all the soft approach as much as you can until it fails before any possibility of military intervention will happen. If we do not intervene, or if we do not come in between the military leaders of Niger and the civilians of that country, it will send a bad signal to the entire region.
I was going to ask this in just a simple answer. Do you think the junta are going to relinquish power back to the democratic ruler? Yes or no?
It is unlikely until serious pressure is mounted.
Thank you very much, Abdul, for joining us. Thank you. Well, you've heard it. It's really, really unlikely and very
until serious pressure is mounted.
Who will mount the pressure?
Well, ECOMOG and Ecowas. We are hoping.
Hopefully.
Definitely.
Thank you very much, Abdul, for joining us on this fourth segment of the show. We'll be right back with more to talk about.